would be a disaster. President Joe Biden has said that US would not support Israel's plans in the area without considering the refugees there, calling Israel's military conduct in the region over the top. Meanwhile, reports suggest Israeli attacks have killed around 9 people in Rafah. Another airstrike carried out by Israel has killed 5 people in Al-Shifa hospital in Khan Yunis. These attacks have raised the death toll in Gaza region to 28,000.
I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. That we have to do much more to increase the amount of material going in, including fuel, including other items. There are innocent people, innocent women and children who are also in badly in need of help.
To take this discussion forward, we're now joined by KP Fabian, ex-Indian envoy to Qatar, and we'll also be joined by Pant, Vice President of Foreign Policy at the Observer Research Foundation. Let me go across to Ambassador Fabian first. Ambassador Fabian, do you think US's patience with Israel is wearing thin and they will possibly draw a line when it comes to military support to Israel?
Well, thank you and good afternoon. US's patience with Israel is wearing thin, and what we have to notice that as regards the ground action in Gaza, United States had counseled Israel privately and publicly not to do that. But now, regarding Rafah, the language is different. United States will not support it. But what I would like to see is United States will oppose it. To say that United States will not support it, what does it mean? It will not give diplomatic support, or will it cease sending the arms, the 1,000 tons and 2,000 ton bombs? That is a crucial question.
Right. Ambassador Fabian, let me also ask you, Netanyahu has for the moment dismissed all proposals by the Hamas, all proposals for a peace treaty right now, or a ceasefire, or any kind of peace deal for that matter. They don't want to release all the Palestinian prisoners. They don't want to stop the offensive. They don't want to vacate this territory. Do you think that Netanyahu would be agreeable to a different sort of a deal?
Let me put it this way. Netanyahu on his own will not agree, but he can be compelled. But let us understand why Netanyahu will not agree. He will not agree to a long pause or to a permanent ceasefire for the reason that if either happens, then his own political career will be in peril and he might even go to jail pretty soon. So it is in his interest to prolong the war and even to expand the war. But he is caught between, two fires. On the one hand, pressure from the United States and the rest of the international community, especially the Western Europe, which has been supporting him, and not to speak of, the global South, the ICJ judgment and all that. But he's also under pressure from the far right in his own cabinet. They want to go all out to not only to destroy Hamas, they want to occupy Hamas, and if they have their way, they want to exile the Palestinians either to Egypt, to Syria or Jordan, or throw them into the Dead Sea or Mediterranean Sea, whatever.
What are US's options at this juncture, considering that US is also going to go to elections later in this year? There is a lot of support for an offensive against the Hamas to support Israel within the US government. What options does the US really have? And if the Israeli government, if Netanyahu, for his own domestic interests, steps up the offensive against the Hamas, especially in Rafah, what all can the United States do?
May I sort of slightly amend the question? What are President Biden's options? because he's the president and he's also the candidate, as you mentioned. So what are President Biden's options? He has two options. One is to go on publicly, make statements which give the impression that the United States is putting as much pressure on Israel as possible. The other is, well, whether he makes those statements or not, the other is, and this is very important, to delay the next shipment of arms. If he does that, without, if the Pentagon sends a message, oh, the next shipment is getting delayed by a few days, that message will be stronger, clearer, and that will have the necessary impact. And this doesn't have to come out at all.
Right. So you are saying that even a slight delay in sending military support to Israel could have the desired impact of reining them in. Pant, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Do you think the US and the kind of wording that we've seen from Joe Biden saying that Israeli actions in Gaza have been over the top, do you think now is the time when we would possibly see Joe Biden, Antony Blinken getting tough with Israel in backroom negotiations?
I do think, Parikshit, there's a high likelihood that Americans will get tougher than in the past. I think that, as you were discussing with Ambassador Fabian, that there is a domestic political challenge that Biden administration faces, because there is let's remember that Mr. Trump can easily change the game by coming in, on the Israeli side in a way that will dent President Biden's already very tenuous polling numbers. So I think it's also a question of how they want to play domestically. But certainly there is no doubt that increasingly we have seen from Washington an impatience with what Mr. Netanyahu is doing. And particularly in this case of Rafah, the kind of statements that have come out indicate that perhaps that patience is running out, and perhaps we will now see, I think what you were discussing earlier, that aid and weapon supplies will come into the picture in back-channel negotiations.
Right. Harsh, what do you think about the Arab nations, the Middle Eastern countries? Many are very angry right now with Israel because of the civilian deaths in Palestine, civilian deaths in Gaza. Netanyahu has refused any deal which includes freeing of 9,000 Palestinian prisoners in return for 100 Israeli hostages. But if this offensive continues in Gaza, and if Netanyahu goes in for a military operation in Rafah that leads to more civilian deaths, how do you expect the crisis to escalate, some of the Arab nations to react?
See, Arab nations are also at a crossroads, because Arab nations certainly do not want to, engage and go where Mr. Netanyahu is taking the region. They, if you recall, the plans as far as the Arab nations were concerned, particularly I think Saudi Arabia and UAE, they were very, very keen that the focus should be on economic rebuilding of the region, of how they want to connect with the wider geographies around the world. The whole IMEC project emerged, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor project emerged out of this dynamic that Saudis and Emiratis were very keen on changing the geo-economic complexion of the region. So I think they are very troubled by what is happening, and certainly they would be increasingly also cognizant of the street challenge on the Arab street challenge that is often one of the most potent factors. They have not publicly yet come out very, very strongly against Israel, which is also very, very striking. But they are also cognizant that on the streets, anger is growing, and Rafah and any kind of operations, Israeli operations in Rafah, might just tilt the scale. So I'm sure that even they who have back-channel engagements with Netanyahu would be advising him to do differently. But the calculus for Netanyahu at this point is whether he's primarily looking at it through a domestic political lens, or does he have a strategic end game in mind? It doesn't look like he has. And it seems to be that almost everything that he's doing is coming out of a conviction of continuing this war for his own personal reasons, which is also costing him a lot of friends around the world and a lot of public opinion. And for Arab leaders, I think the public opinion is very, very critical.
My final question to both our panelists. Harsh, my final question first to you. When it comes to any sort of deal, the global papers are reporting that Netanyahu has not ruled out a deal altogether. Possibly he wants a different deal. When do you think he will agree to a peace agreement, even though for the moment he has rejected all terms that Hamas has offered in its peace proposal?
See, I think he's also, for him, this is at this point, if there is a deal and the conflict is de-escalated, what is his future? I think he's also looking at his own future. And by all reckoning, this is the last roll of the dice for him. Now, if that is the case, then from his vantage point, he would be looking at a legacy establishing deal where not only do you have some finality to this perpetual conflict, but also a statement to his domestic audience that, look, I have now dismantled Hamas in a manner that it cannot be a threat to Israeli security. Now, it's a huge ask. But I do think that for him, at this stage in his career and at the kind of anger that he's spawned in Israel with his leadership, that's the only way to salvage his reputation. And if that is the case, then I would say that there is a long road ahead for any kind of an agreement.
There's a long road ahead for any kind of agreement. We've run out of time, but thank you very much, Ambassador Fabian and Harsh Pant, for joining us on the program here on News Center, explaining us what Netanyahu really wants at this stage, and Ambassador Fabian explaining that even a slight delay in sending military consignments to Israel can have the desired impact of slowing down their military offensive. We're taking a short break here on News Center, but don't go anywhere. We're getting you a series of exclusive interviews, first with Martin Reza, Vice President of the South Asian Division at the World Bank, and also an exclusive with Lenovo on their India plan. Stay tuned.